The wind howled across the Arctic tundra as Dr. Elena Martinez stared at the readings on her tablet for the third time. The electromagnetic anomaly beneath the ice hadn't just grown, it had evolved. What began as a simple magnetic disturbance had transformed into something that defied the laws of physics themselves. Dr. Martinez. Marcus Wong's voice crackled through her radio, excitement evident despite the static. You need to see this. We've broken through to a chamber. Elena pulled her thick Arctic gear tighter around her body and trudged through the snow toward the excavation site. The international team had been working here for 6 months, following what they thought was a unique geological formation. Now, 2 kilometers beneath the surface, they had found something that would change everything. The descent into the ice shaft took 20 minutes. As the elevator platform lowered her into the depths, Elena reviewed the events that had led them here. 3 years ago, a routine geological survey had detected an perfectly spherical void in the ice. Initial scans suggested it was artificial, but no one was prepared for what they would actually find. Marcus met her at the bottom, his dark eyes wide with wonder. It's like nothing we've ever seen before, he said, leading her through the carved ice tunnel. The chamber, it's warm, Elena. Warm and completely dry. They rounded a corner, and Elena stopped dead in her tracks. The ice tunnel opened into a vast circular chamber, easily 50 meters in diameter. But it wasn't the size that took her breath away, it was the walls. They seemed to be made of a single piece of dark metal, covered in intricate patterns that shifted and moved like oil on water. How is this possible? She whispered, her voice barely audible over the hum of their equipment. This chamber should be crushed by the weight of the ice above it. Dr. Yuki Tanaka, their theoretical physicist, was already taking readings near one of the walls. The metal, she said without looking up, it's not just supporting the weight, it's negating it somehow. There's a field emanating from it that's affecting local spacetime itself. Elena approached the nearest wall, her hand outstretched. The pattern seemed to respond to her presence, swirling more rapidly as she got closer. Just before her fingers made contact, Marcus called out. Wait. We should run more tests before. His warning came too late. Elena's fingers brushed the surface, and the entire chamber erupted with light. The patterns on the walls began to pulse with a blue-white radiance that seemed to pierce through her very being. A deep thrumming filled the air, resonating through her bones. Everyone out. Elena shouted, but as they turned to run, something extraordinary happened. The light coalesced into distinct shapes, forming what could only be described as holographic projections in the center of the chamber. They showed stars, galaxies, and what appeared to be mathematical equations of stunning complexity. It's some kind of database, Yuki breathed, her tablet frantically recording everything. Or maybe a library. But Elena knew it was more than that. As she watched the projections shift and change, she began to understand. This wasn't just a library, it was a warning. The images changed, showing a civilization far more advanced than their own. They had mastered time itself, bending it to their will. But something had gone wrong. The images showed worlds caught in temporal loops, civilizations trapped in endless cycles of their own moments. They did this to themselves, Elena realized aloud. They tried to control time, and it backfired. This facility, it's not just a record of what happened. It's still active. As if responding to her words, new projections appeared, showing Earth. The patterns began to pulse more rapidly, and Elena felt a subtle shift in the air around them. Something was happening, something they had set in motion simply by discovering this place. Marcus's voice shook as he spoke. Elena, the readings, they're showing temporal distortions forming. Not just here, they're appearing all over the world. Elena's mind raced. They had unknowingly activated something that an ancient alien civilization had buried here, perhaps as a last resort. But was it meant to be a weapon, a tool, or a salvation? Before she could voice her thoughts, the chamber's light suddenly intensified. The air itself seemed to ripple, and Elena felt a strange sensation, as if reality was becoming less solid around them. She looked at her team, seeing the same realization dawn on their faces. They weren't just observers anymore. They had become part of whatever grand design this facility was meant to fulfill. Seal off the site, she ordered, her voice steady despite the fear churning in her gut. No one comes in or out until we understand what we're dealing with. And get me a secure line to the Surface Research Command. They need to know what we found. As her team scrambled to follow her orders, Elena turned back to the swirling projections. The mathematical equations continued to dance in the air, and she could swear they were becoming clearer, as if the facility was trying to communicate something crucial. They had discovered something magnificent and terrifying. The question now was whether they could understand it in time to prevent history from repeating itself. Because if the warning in these projections was accurate, they had just started a countdown that could either save humanity or trap it forever in an endless cycle of its own making. The facility's hum grew louder, and Elena knew that somewhere, in cities across the world, the first temporal anomalies were beginning to manifest. They had until those anomalies stabilized to figure out the truth behind this ancient technology. Time, ironically, was running out. He first reports came from Tokyo. In the bustling Shibuya district, thousands of pedestrians found themselves crossing the famous intersection over and over again, trapped in a 3-minute loop that seemed to have no end. By the time Elena's team had emerged from the Arctic facility, similar incidents had been reported in 12 major cities across the globe. Commander David Rhodes of the Global Crisis Response Unit stood before a wall of screens in their New York headquarters, his weathered face illuminated by the glow of dozens of news feeds. Each showed the same horrifying reality, temporal bubbles forming around population centers, trapping millions in moments that refused to end. Dr. Martinez, his voice was grave as he addressed Elena through the secure video link. Please tell me you have something that can help us understand this. Elena gestured to the holographic data floating beside her. After evacuating the facility, they had managed to transfer some of its projections to their own systems. The technology we're dealing with was created by a civilization that existed millions of years ago. They discovered a way to manipulate what they called temporal fabric, essentially, the underlying structure of time itself. And now their technology is affecting our cities? Rhodes asked, his skepticism evident. Not exactly, Dr. Yuki Tanaka interjected, stepping into view. The facility isn't causing these anomalies directly. It's more like, it's revealing something that was already there. The aliens discovered that time isn't as linear as we thought. It has weak points, places where it naturally wants to fold back on itself. Marcus Wong appeared next to them, tablet in hand. We've been analyzing the pattern of the temporal bubbles. They're not random. Look at this. He sent a map to Rhodes, showing red dots where the anomalies had appeared. When connected, they formed an intricate geometric pattern. It's a resonance pattern, Elena explained. The facility is acting like a tuning fork, making these natural temporal weak points visible, and in some cases, active. But here's the real problem, according to the alien data, these points tend to grow. If we don't find a way to stabilize them, they'll eventually cover the entire planet. Rhodes ran a hand through his gray hair. How long? At the current rate of expansion? 3 weeks, maybe less. The commander's response was cut off by a sudden commotion in his command center. One of his officers rushed to him, whispering something urgent. Rhodes's face darkened. Dr. Martinez, we have a new development. The London bubble just changed. Instead of people repeating the same moment, they're experiencing different time periods simultaneously. We're getting reports of Victorian-era carriages moving through modern traffic, World War II air raids happening in real time over the financial district. Elena felt her blood run cold. This was exactly what the alien warnings had shown, the degradation of temporal stability. Commander, we need to get a team into one of these bubbles. If we can study the phenomenon up close. Absolutely not, Rhodes cut her off. We've already lost contact with 3 reconnaissance teams that tried to enter the Tokyo bubble. They just vanish. Then we need to do it differently, Yuki said, her eyes bright with sudden inspiration. The alien facility, it wasn't just studying these anomalies, it was containing them. Elena, remember those equations we saw? I think they're instructions for building some kind of temporal shielding. Marcus was already pulling up the relevant data. She's right. Look at these components, with the right materials, we could construct devices to safely enter the bubbles. Maybe even stabilize them from within. Elena felt a glimmer of hope, but it was tempered by what she'd learned in the facility. There's something else you need to know, Commander. The aliens, they didn't just abandon this technology. They sealed it away because they discovered something inside these temporal weak points. Something they feared. Rhodes leaned closer to his camera. What did they find? We're not sure yet. The data is corrupted. But whatever it was, it changed their entire civilization. They went from trying to master time to trying to lock it down, to prevent anyone from ever accessing these points again. A heavy silence fell over both rooms. Finally, Rhodes spoke. How long to build these temporal shields? 3 days, maybe 4, Yuki answered. But we'll need resources, specialized materials. You'll have whatever you need, Rhodes assured them. But I want to be clear, if we can't contain these anomalies, governments around the world are preparing to take more drastic measures. There's already talk of using nuclear weapons to try to disrupt the temporal fields. That would be catastrophic, Elena protested. The energy release could accelerate the degradation process exponentially. Then I suggest you work fast, Doctor. Because right now, you're our only viable option. After the communication ended, Elena turned to her team. The weight of billions of lives pressed down on them, heavier than all the Arctic ice above their facility. They had awakened something that ancient beings had tried to keep dormant, and now they had to succeed where that advanced civilization had failed. Marcus was already organizing their equipment, while Yuki immersed herself in the alien equations. Elena walked to the chamber's wall, where the shifting pattern seemed more agitated than ever. As she watched them swirl and pulse, she couldn't shake the feeling that they were missing something crucial. The aliens hadn't just failed to master time, they had discovered something that made them fear it. And as their team raced to build devices to enter the temporal bubbles, Elena wondered if they too would soon learn why some mysteries were meant to stay buried in the ice. The temporal shield hummed softly as Elena checked its calibration one final time. The device, roughly the size of a backpack, represented 4 days of non-stop work by her team, translating alien mathematics into functioning technology. Now, standing at the edge of London's temporal bubble, she was about to discover if their interpretation had been correct. Shield integrity at 98%, Yuki's voice came through her earpiece. The physicist had insisted on monitoring the equipment remotely from their mobile command center, a converted military vehicle parked half a kilometer from the bubble's edge. Remember, if the readings drop below 60%, you need to get out immediately. Understood, Elena replied, watching the shimmering barrier before her. The temporal bubble had grown since their last report, now encompassing most of central London. Within its translucent walls, reality itself seemed to flutter like pages in a book being rapidly flipped. Victorian smokestacks materialized and vanished beside modern skyscrapers, while horse-drawn carriages shared streets with electric cars. Marcus stood beside her, adjusting his own shield. I still think this is crazy, he muttered, but his eyes shone with the same scientific curiosity that had drawn them all to the Arctic in the first place. Ready? Elena nodded, and together they stepped through the barrier. The sensation was indescribable, like being pulled in 1,000 directions at once while remaining perfectly still. Their shields crackled with energy, creating a stable bubble of normal spacetime around them. Through the protective field, Elena watched in awe as time itself fractured and reassembled before their eyes. This is incredible, Marcus breathed, recording everything with their specialized equipment. The temporal displacement isn't random. Look, it's following some kind of pattern. He was right. As they moved deeper into the affected zone, Elena noticed that the time shift seemed to spiral around a central point, like water circling a drain. But before she could investigate further, Yuki's panicked voice cut through their comms. "Elena, Marcus, something's wrong. Your shields, they're resonating with an unknown frequency. There's something else in there with you." As if on cue, the air before them began to ripple differently. The fractured time streams parted like a curtain, and through the gap stepped something that defied explanation. It appeared humanoid, but its form shifted constantly, as if it existed in multiple times simultaneously. Where a face should have been, there was only a swirling vortex of temporal energy. "Dr. Martinez," the being spoke, its voice echoing as if coming from many moments at once. "We have waited long for this meeting." Elena's scientific mind raced to catalog what she was seeing, even as her instincts screamed at her to run. "You're what the aliens were afraid of, aren't you?" "What are you?" "We are the chronoforms," the being replied. "We exist in the spaces between moments, in the folds of time that your kind is only now beginning to perceive. The ones you call the aliens discovered us, just as you have. They feared what we represented, the truth about the nature of time itself." Marcus had positioned himself slightly in front of Elena, his shield's energy field intensifying. "And what truth is that?" "That time is not a river flowing in one direction, but an ocean of possibility. We are its natural inhabitants, and these anomalies you seek to cure are simply the places where the fabric of reality has grown thin enough for us to emerge." Elena's mind flashed back to the warning symbols in the Arctic facility. The aliens didn't just seal away their technology, they were trying to seal you away, weren't they? The chronoform's form rippled with what might have been amusement. "They tried. They created great machines to strengthen the barriers between time streams, to prevent us from making contact. But in doing so, they caused exactly what they feared most, the destabilization of their entire civilization." The time loops, Elena realized. They weren't a natural phenomenon, they were a side effect of trying to seal off parts of reality itself. "Correct. And now your people stand at the same crossroads. You can attempt to close these windows between worlds, as they did, and suffer the same fate. Or what? Or you can work with us. Help us establish a controlled connection between our realms. We can teach you to navigate the time streams, to understand reality as we do. Your civilization could evolve beyond the linear prison of cause and effect." Before Elena could respond, Yuki's voice crackled through their comms again, more urgent than before. "Elena, the temporal distortions are intensifying. Whatever that thing is, its presence is accelerating the breakdown. You need to get out now." The chronoforms seemed to sigh, the sound like wind through a temporal corridor. They refused to listen as well, in the end. "Consider your choice carefully, Dr. Martinez. We will be watching." With that, the being seemed to fold in on itself, vanishing into the swirling time streams. Almost immediately, the local distortions began to stabilize. Shield integrity dropping. Yuki warned. 70%, 65. "We're coming out," Elena commanded, and she and Marcus began their careful retreat. But as they navigated back through the temporal maze, her mind was racing. The aliens hadn't failed to master time, they had discovered they weren't alone in their universe, and their fear had led them to take desperate measures. Now humanity faced the same choice, attempt to seal away something they didn't fully understand, or risk opening a door that could never be fully closed. As they finally emerged from the bubble, Elena knew that their discovery in the Arctic hadn't just been about finding ancient technology. It had been about making first contact with beings that existed outside of time itself. And somehow, she had to convince Commander Rhodes and the world's governments that the real threat wasn't the chronoforms, it was the possibility of repeating the aliens' mistakes. The question was, would anyone believe her? Commander Rhodes slammed his fist on the conference table, causing the holographic displays to flicker. Absolutely not. You're suggesting we open a dialogue with entities that are actively destroying our cities? Elena stood her ground, though exhaustion pulled at every fiber of her being. They had been in emergency sessions for 18 hours straight, ever since their encounter with the Chronoform in London. They're not destroying our cities, Commander. They're trying to make contact. There's a difference. The Situation Room in the Global Crisis Response Unit's headquarters had become their war room. Maps showed the spread of temporal bubbles across the globe, now 27 major cities affected, with smaller anomalies appearing in rural areas. The pattern they formed was no longer geometric, it had begun to pulse and shift like a living thing. Dr. Tanaka, Rhodes turned to Yuki, who was analyzing new data from the Arctic facility. Please tell me you have an alternative solution. Yuki looked up from her screens, dark circles under her eyes. The aliens' containment protocols are complex, but we think we can replicate them. We could theoretically create a temporal barrier around Earth, similar to what they built around their own worlds. But it would fail, Marcus interjected, pulling up simulation models. We've run the numbers 100 times. Any attempt to seal off the time streams completely would create a cascading temporal collapse. That's exactly what happened to the aliens. They tried to lock out the chronoforms and ended up fracturing their own reality. Elena watched the simulation play out again, a geometric mesh forming around a model Earth, holding for a brief moment before cracking and imploding, taking the planet with it. The same fate that had befallen countless alien worlds. There has to be another way, Rhodes insisted. What about a partial containment? Could we seal off just the affected areas? Before anyone could respond, the room's emergency lights began flashing. A junior officer burst through the door, face pale. Sir, the Tokyo bubble, it's destabilizing. They rushed to the main display. The temporal anomaly over Tokyo had begun to spiral outward, its boundaries dissolving into chaos. Within its expanding radius, different eras crashed together with increasing violence. Modern buildings aged centuries in seconds, then reverted to steel frames, then became nothing but future ruins. People caught in the effect experienced dozens of lifetimes in moments. My God, Rhodes whispered. How many people are trapped in there? 8 million, at least, Yuki answered, her voice shaking. And the effect is spreading. At this rate, it'll consume most of Japan within days. Elena felt a familiar sensation, the same rippling in reality she'd experienced in London. A chronoform materialized in the center of the room, causing guards to raise weapons uselessly against a being that existed in multiple moments simultaneously. The window of opportunity closes, it announced, its voice echoing through time itself. Your containment attempts in Tokyo have accelerated the degradation. Soon, all temporal barriers will collapse. Rhodes stepped forward, despite his security team's protests. Why are you doing this? What do you want from us? We want what all beings want, to survive. To grow. To connect. For millions of years, we have watched countless civilizations discover us, fear us, and destroy themselves trying to shut us out. We had hoped humanity might choose differently. Elena moved to stand between Rhodes and the chronoform. You said we could work together, find a controlled way to connect our realms. Show us how. The being's form shifted, showing glimpses of possible futures. The technology you found in the Arctic was not meant to contain us, originally. It was designed to communicate, to bridge the gap between linear time and our eternal now. Only fear transformed it into a weapon. The facility, Elena realized. It's not just a warning system, it's a translator. A way to understand your realm. Yes. But it requires acceptance of a fundamental truth, time is not meant to be contained. It must flow freely between all states of existence. The aliens could not accept this loss of control. Can humanity? Rhodes looked at the displays showing Tokyo's deterioration, then at the simulation of failed containment. If we agree to work with you, can you stabilize the existing anomalies? We can guide you in creating harmony between our realms, yes. But you must understand, your experience of reality will change. Humanity will need to evolve. A tense silence filled the room. Elena looked at her team, Marcus, who had followed her into the Arctic ice and through temporal barriers, Yuki, who had helped translate alien mathematics into human understanding, and Rhodes, who carried the weight of humanity's future in his decisions. "Commander," Elena said softly, "everything we've learned points to one truth: we're standing at a junction in human evolution. We can try to remain what we are and almost certainly destroy ourselves, or we can take a step into the unknown and become something more." Rhodes studied the Tokyo feeds for a long moment. Finally, he straightened, decision evident in his bearing. "Dr. Martinez, you have my authorization to attempt communication through the Arctic facility. But I want containment protocols ready if things go wrong. Humanity gets one shot at this, let's not waste it." The chronoform's form brightened. "We will await you at the point of first contact. Come prepared to learn, and to change." As the being faded away, Elena's team was already mobilizing. They had to return to the Arctic facility, this time not to shut it down, but to fully activate it. To use it as it was truly meant to be used. But as they rushed to prepare, Elena couldn't shake a nagging doubt. The aliens had started down this same path, only to turn back in fear. As they flew north through the perpetual Arctic night, she wondered, what had they seen in humanity that made them believe this time might be different? The answer, she suspected, waited for them in the chamber of shifting lights, 2 kilometers beneath the ice. The Arctic facility thrummed with power unlike anything Elena had ever experienced. The walls no longer simply shifted with patterns, they pulsed with possibilities, each ripple showing glimpses of different timelines, different choices, different futures. Her team had spent the last 48 hours reprogramming the ancient machinery, not to contain temporal energy, but to channel it. Final checks complete, Yuki announced, her fingers dancing across holographic interfaces that merged alien and human technology. The facility is ready to serve as a temporal bridge. Marcus monitored the global feed, where temporal bubbles now covered nearly a third of Earth's major population centers. Tokyo's deterioration has slowed, but we're seeing similar instability patterns in London, New York, and Mumbai. Whatever we're going to do, we need to do it now. Elena took a deep breath, centering herself. The weight of humanity's future pressed down on her shoulders, heavier than all the ice above them. "Commander Rhodes, are you receiving?" Clearly, Rhodes's voice came through their communications system. "The World Security Council is standing by. You have authorization to proceed, Dr. Martinez. God help us all." Elena approached the central platform they had constructed in the chamber's heart. Following the chronoform's guidance, they had modified the alien technology to create what they hoped would be a stable interface between realms. It was their only chance to prevent the complete collapse of temporal stability worldwide. "Beginning sequence," she announced, placing her hand on the control surface. The chamber's lights dimmed, then flared with new intensity. The air itself seemed to thicken with potential. Yuki's voice was tight with concentration. "Quantum field stabilizing. Temporal resonance at 60%, 70, 80. The chamber walls became transparent, revealing the swirling chaos of multiple time streams beyond. Chronoforms began to materialize, not just one, but dozens, their shifting forms creating a dance of temporal energy around the room. "We acknowledge your choice," their voices merged into one, echoing through time itself. "Are you prepared for what comes next?" Elena looked at her team, seeing the same mix of fear and determination in their eyes that she felt in her heart. "We're ready. Show us how to bridge our worlds." The chronoforms moved closer, their forms beginning to synchronize with the facility's pulsing energy. "What we offer is not merely communication, but transformation. Your consciousness must expand to perceive time as we do, all moments existing simultaneously, all possibilities concurrent." "The human mind isn't designed to process reality that way," Marcus protested. "The strain could. The human mind is more adaptable than you know, the chronoforms interrupted. Your species dreams, imagines, remembers, already you touch multiple time streams without realizing it. We will simply awaken what already lies dormant within you. Elena felt the energy building around them, saw the temporal readouts climbing toward levels they'd never encountered. How do we begin? You already have. The chamber erupted with light, and Elena felt her consciousness expanding. She saw her own timeline unfolding in all directions, past, future, and countless paths not taken. But it didn't stop there. Her awareness spread outward, connecting with others, creating a web of shared temporal perception that began in the Arctic and rapidly spread across the globe. Through this expanded awareness, she understood at last what the aliens had feared. This wasn't just about communicating with beings from another realm, it was about humanity transcending its linear existence, becoming something entirely new. The temporal bubbles, Yuki gasped, her own consciousness expanding. They're not collapsing, they're transforming. Integrating. Elena saw it too. The chaotic temporal zones around Earth weren't breaking down reality, they were breaking down the barriers between different states of existence. And as humanity's collective consciousness expanded to encompass this new way of perceiving reality, the chaos resolved into harmony. Through their new awareness, they could see the chronoforms as they truly were, not invaders or destroyers, but guides, helping humanity take its next evolutionary step. The aliens had retreated from this threshold, choosing isolation over transformation. But humanity, with its endless curiosity and adaptability, was choosing a different path. It's working, Marcus announced, his voice filled with wonder. The temporal distortions are stabilizing worldwide. But not through containment, through integration. Commander Rhodes's voice came through, touched with awe. We're getting reports from every affected city. People aren't just seeing different time periods anymore, they're understanding them, moving between them. It's like humanity is waking up from a dream of linear time. Elena watched as the transformation spread across the globe. Humans everywhere were gaining the ability to perceive and navigate the true nature of time, not as a straight line, but as an ocean of infinite possibilities. The panic in the temporal bubbles turned to wonder as people began to understand their new reality. This is what the facility was meant to do, Elena realized. Not to warn us away from this evolution, but to guide us through it when we were ready. The aliens left it here hoping that someday, a species would choose to face this threshold with courage instead of fear. The chronoforms moved through the chamber, their forms now perfectly clear to Elena's enhanced perception. You have taken the first step into a larger reality. Your species will face many challenges as you learn to navigate your new existence, but you will not face them alone. As the transformation continued to spread, Elena felt a deep sense of peace. Humanity had not merely survived this crisis, they had transcended it. The cycle of fear and isolation that had claimed so many alien civilizations was finally broken. In the Arctic chamber where it all began, Elena and her team stood at the dawn of a new era. Through the facility's walls, they could see not just the ice above them, but all the moments that had led to this one, and all the possibilities that lay ahead. The choice they had made here would ripple through time itself, marking the point where humanity stopped being prisoners of linear time and became something more, partners in the eternal dance of existence, ready to explore not just the vast reaches of space, but the infinite dimensions of time itself. As the facility's light stabilized into a steady glow, Elena knew that their journey was just beginning. The real question was no longer whether humanity would survive, but what they would become in their new existence as creatures of both time and timelessness. The cycle of oblivion was broken. The age of temporal awakening had begun.